When we do legislative session like in 13 that we did, all of the laws that we passed, those rules that are created by those laws, we're reviewing now. And that's what happens the first part of every session. You review those rules to make sure that they follow the intent of the laws that we passed of the last session. We're the only state in the nation that does that. And we're allowed to do it because of a Supreme Court decision based on our Constitution. There are two other states that do something similar, but they have to go back in and do legislation, pass a bill to get rid of a rule. We can, in the Idaho Senate and the Idaho House, we can reject a rule and say, nope, that wasn't in accordance with the intent of our legislation. Go back to the drawing board and rewrite that rule, whatever the department is. This year, I'm seeing more and more of the departments referencing CFRs. And a CFR is a federal rule that a department such as EPA, the Department of Health and Human Services, they create the rules and modify those rules. And the way that they create them and modify them is through the Federal Registry. So Congress does not review any of those rules that are created. Congress will write the laws and then continue on looking at more laws. The departments will they assume the departments write the rules that are within the intent of the legislation that they passed. So is what we end up with at the states is all of these CFRs, these congressional rules that we have to deal with. Is what we expect our departments to do is to look at those rules, anything that changes what we had legislative intent for, any federal rules, they should rewrite our regulations, our rules, and then come back to the legislature during this 3-week period of the first of the session, and we should review that and approve those rules. This year, I'm seeing more and more departments coming to the rule review referencing a CFR, a number of a federal regulation. Well, you can go, any of us can go on the web and look at the Federal Registry, and every day there are changes to federal rules. And those changes stay on the Federal Registry for 60 days. And there's a 60-day comment period. Then there's a decision point based on those comments whether that rule goes into effect or not. And if it goes into effect, you can have Rule 42 CFR 455. That rule can, and we just referenced that in one of the rules we just passed. I voted against, but we just referenced that all businesses have to meet the standards as defined in this 42 CFR 455. Well, that might have been fine when they wrote that rule. However, CFR, that could have been changed. Could come out in the Federal Registry tomorrow that says every business that has to meet this standard now has to have a window somewhere in their building. We don't get to review that. So every time the legislature here passes a rule that is referenced to CFR, we cede our authority of not reviewing that rule because it's in a CFR that we don't review. And so my points the last couple of weeks here in reviewing these CFRs is more to send a message to the departments. We have you as a department to review the CFRs, take the information out of that CFR and put it in our rule. Next year, if that CFR changes, take the change of that information and put it in our rule. We don't want you to reference the CFR, otherwise we have no need for you. I mean, if we just want to have our rules be federal CFRs, we have no need for the departments to write rules. We can just have federal CFRs. So my point, I'm trying to drill into our departments and other legislators, allow them to understand every time we pass a rule with a CFR reference in it, we are ceding our legislative oversight authority in reviewing those rules. And that is it's a grave concern to me, because I don't want to lose the ability of this state to review our rules from our legislation. I think that's very important.
I mean, and
There are CFRs that we have no choice in accepting, right? But we really should take the information in that CFR and move that into our own regulations. But the legislature needs to be able to review that and comment on that. And we should be able to say, you know what, the federal registry, this federal department might say this is how they want it run, but the legislature in the state of Idaho should have the ability to go, now we don't want to go down that road. We do not want to have that rule. Go back to the drawing board. Department, go back to the federal department that changed the rule and tell them, Idaho doesn't want to go down that road. We're going to have to change that rule. But every time we cede our authority to review that rule, we lose the ability to allow our department or to direct our department to go back to Health and Human Services or go back to the Department of Interior and say, Idaho's not going to go down that road. So we can't cede that authority. We have to take those, the regulations in those CFRs that we agree with, that we understand, put them word for word in our regulations that's applicable to Idaho businesses and Idaho citizens. That's what the job of rules, that's what the purpose of those rules are for.
Okay. Well, thank you, Senator.